cape.
Welcome Wargamers, this is Doug with 2 Plus Tough, and today we are doing a different kind of lore video. A question that comes up quite frequently from folks in the comments and personal messages on Facebook and things like that is people asking, how do I get into Age of Sigmar lore? This channel obviously has a lot of content where I try very hard to share some really interesting things about the Mortal Realms with you, but there are people who I encourage to read for themselves. Where should I start with books? What's a good entry point? Things like that. And so the point of this video is to give you 3 really great entry points into this kind of setting, this universe, and get you kind of acclimated to how the fantasy world works now that we've moved from Warhammer Fantasy Battles to Age of Sigmar. I want to be upfront and honest and say I have the links to all of these books down below. Those are affiliate links that go over to Kindle, where you can buy them for a Kindle device or Amazon, whatever you use. And there's no extra cost to those. It's just if you use those links, I get a little extra cut, and so it's kind of nice. But so if you are interested in reading these books, I would say don't buy it if you're not interested in it. But if you are, please use the links below. Now, with that all the way, the main consternation that people had with Age of Sigmar lore in the beginning when it was first released was that it was just such a big sandbox that people had a hard time rationalizing kind of the abstractness of everything, right? And I was told a friend many moons ago, if you have a sandbox, that's what GW wanted to create, where you could do anything, and that's a really cool idea. The problem is that if your sandbox is too big, it becomes a desert, meaning there's just nothing there. And so what the 3 books that I'm going to talk about today are about kind of reeling it in and giving you a great story with some great characters and an awesome introduction to the world. So let's dig into number 1. The first book on our kind of series here is going to be called Hammerhall and Other Stories. This is a compilation book. It has a bunch of various quick reads and somewhat longer stories that aren't quite full novels all put together, and they all center around a city called Hammerhall. This is a very fascinating place if you're not familiar with it. It was in the Seasons of War campaign, where it's a city that was built with a realm gate in it, so that it kind of developed on both ends. So half the city is in Garan and half the city is in the Realm of Fire. So it makes a very cool, compelling, dynamic city. And GW actually markets this as kind of their intro book, and I see it for great reasons. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. But as far as what the book is about, all the events in the book take in or around this city called Hammerhall, but they're not necessarily related. It's not one overarching narrative. And so what you do is you get different kinds of flavors of storylines, motivations from different kinds of characters. You get tension from different societies and stuff kind of clashing and rubbing into each other. As we talk about order cities, which I hope to have a video on here pretty soon, it's not peaceful, right? It's an amalgamation of a lot of different cultures and ideas, and the only uniting factor is that they're all against chaos. But that's it. That's where it ends. And so there's a lot of strife in those cities between order factions and also chaos trying to slip in. This book series, kind of not really a series, but collection centered around this city, very, very fascinating. So moving into what makes this book and compilation a great starting point. Well, for starters, you do get a great compilation of authors. Black Library has some incredibly great writers, and by getting a sampling of many of them, you really get to see how different authors interpret and understand and convey different ideas. For example, my favorite author is Josh Reynolds. We'll get to that in a little bit. But he has a short story in here, and I absolutely encourage you to read it. And by finding an author you like that really speaks your language, it goes a long way. The fact that all of these stories, even though they're not related directly, center around one location really gives you an idea for how much storytelling can be done in one location. Rather than having this big open sandbox that can do anything, you pick a fixed point and you can just really dive into it. There's a lot of stories that happen in a city. We all know this in the real world. It's a very true statement. So even though it doesn't necessarily, answer all your questions about the mortal realms in general, it does really magnify one location. And sometimes that's all you really need to get a foothold in sort of a narrative, is just give me a solid place and a solid time. Now, kind of piggybacking off that point, I will also say that this book does its best to convey how abstract things can be in Age of Sigmar by redefining one location. By that I mean you have two different realms that straddle this city, and so it creates a lot of dynamic, like the city itself is alive, and it's very different in one side of the realm gate to the other one. And so, you know what I mean? Like, it redefines that idea. You're not getting bored with a fixed narrative and a fixed location. It itself is a part of the story. Now, number 2 on our list is City of Secrets by Nick Horth. I'm going to be very honest with you. The reason this channel exists is because of this book. The reason I say that is I was trying to do some lore videos, but everything was, again, so abstract and out there that I really had trouble kind of understanding the kind of lore that I wanted to share. But then this book, City of Secrets, came out. And what it did was it gave us a fixed location with awesome characters who we were relatable to, and created this great story based in the city of Excelsis. If you're not familiar with it, give you a brief summary. A captain of the Free People's Guard of the city stumbles onto a horrific secret, and the more he tries to get help and rectify the situation, it turns out that there's a huge Tzeentch cult, and it just infects all echelons of society. And so you're trying to resolve that. You get to meet a cool cast of characters. There's obviously the city captain guard is the main character, but then there's also a witch hunter, and there is a Stormcast Eternal, but he's not like the dude, right? Like in all the other books, Stormcast are the guys. Not in this one. It's just a human, which is great. If you're looking for human lore, like Free Guild and those kinds of things, people comment quite a bit. This is a book you're going to want to pick up. It's extremely well written, has a lot of twists and turns, and it is by far the most old worldy book that we have. Meaning, if you think about like Gotrek and Felix, or any of the old world books that center around humans and they're very limited adventures where it's a very clear narrative, point A to point B. But there are twists and turns because it's very Tzeentchy. But I mean, my point being that it's a linear narrative, character growth, more traditional kinds of fantasy. It's really something you can sink your teeth into very easily. And so moving into what makes this particular book great is that it's very approachable for someone. If you've ever experienced fantasy in your life, meaning like Lord of the Rings or obviously Warhammer Fantasy Battles kind of stuff, anything like that, is what I'm talking about, that open D&D type stuff, you're going to understand the concepts in this book. There's nothing so out of the ordinary, abstract, I should say, that you're going to struggle to understand it, but it is still very intriguing and very Warhammery. As I said, it is one of the few books that kind of features and focuses on humans, particularly Free Guild, as a kind of core character and the lens with which we see the world. And due to that, the heroes in our story are fragile, and so the danger seems more significant than, say, Stormcast, who just kind of keep coming back. Now, obviously, I don't believe that there's consequences they're coming back, but from a narrative perspective, things seem more dire in this story than they do if it was just all Stormcast, and that's really cool. And number 3 on our list is Nagash, the Undying King by Josh Reynolds. Now, I told you we were going to talk about Josh Reynolds. He's my favorite Black Library author. This book is, let me give you a quick summary here. Nagash was struck down in the Age of Chaos by Archaon and has needed time to recoup. And he recoups kind of in this little sub-realm. And it turns out that this huge warband of Nurgle has found out somehow where he is, and is moving through realm gates to come to his little nook for restoration. And so Arcan the Black and Neferata round up all of the living and undead forces in the area to mount a defense to give Nagash enough time to heal up. So what you're looking at is this epic defense of Nagash. It features a massive Nurgle warband, which includes a demon contingent. It has like Slaves to Darkness. It also has the actual like Blight Kings, like those dudes in there. So there's a lot of great elements here. You also, on the undead side, or the dead side I should say, you obviously see Arcan the Black, Neferata. You get necromancers, but different kinds of necromancers. It's a lot of cool stuff. So moving into why is this book really, really cool? Truth of the matter is, I've gushed about this book on this channel before, and I could gush for hours again. Aside from City of Secrets, it's the most time that we've spent with a common person, a human that we can really relate to. And that's important when you're trying to grasp a very abstract universe. It gives us an entirely fresh look at Shyish, humans, the gods themselves, how they're not all-powerful. The idea of necromancy itself is redefined in this book. It features a strong female lead by a character named Tamara, and she's incredibly. She faces some really terrible moral choices that you have to make if you're a leader of people in these dire times. And so we get to be along with her. We get to see her development as a character, what brings her to those choices. It's really, really great to see. On the Nurgle side, I will say this book alone made me wanted to go play Maggotkin of Nurgle. And the reason is we see more character from their side of the fence than we've ever seen before with the Chaos Army. You have competing, I guess, devotions. You have a Herald of Nurgle on one side who's trying to lead the demonic aspects of this army, and he's in direct competition with the Putrid Blight King style of army on the other side, who are more about honor. It's just the Nurgle kind of honor. And so they're competing with one another, backstabbing one another, and all the time moving from the Realm Gate to where they think Nagash is. And the things that are thrown at them along this journey are incredible. Okay, like you got bone giants and dire wolves and ghost ogres and all kinds of crazy stuff that's incredibly cool to read about. And to see those characters, those chaos characters, interact with one another gives you a greater appreciation of how these kinds of cobbled together forces can actually interact. Now, all that stuff I just mentioned, the monsters attacking the dire wolves, what I'm really getting at here is that it has some of the coolest scenes that we have in a book, but none of them are so abstract that they're hard to understand. You always know exactly what's happening. It's just really, really fun and enjoyable to read. Because of that, it's all very understandable, very clear and compelling, and so that's why I love Nagash Undying King. So friends, those are my kind of go-tos when it comes to diving into Age of Sigmar lore. If you have a faction that you are really interested in, usually when GW releases the Battle Tome, which you should be buying because that's where most of the lore comes from, they also release a kind of a book to go with it from Black Library. So, for example, there was a Pestilence book that came out when the Pestilence Army came out and so forth. All these books have kind of a corollary product in Black Library that you can read more. And I encourage you to go check that out. What you do is go to Black Library, type in the name of your army, and you'll probably find something, to be perfectly honest with you. If you have a book that you love that you think should have been on this list, go ahead and leave it in the comments down below. If it is a really great one, I will pin it to the top because I probably just forgot about it. As always, if you are interested in Age of Sigmar lore, go ahead and click subscribe. On this channel, I do a wide range of lore topics. We're diving into 40k a little bit here, but my main focus has always been Age of Sigmar because it is such an incredibly vast and expansive and interesting universe. So friends, I look forward to seeing you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want to introduce you to some awesome folks. These are my patrons over on Patreon, and they make this show possible by their direct support of me to buy Battle Tomes and Black Library books and all the material I need and the hardware support that I need to make this stuff possible. And if you'd like to join them, go ahead and click over to the Patreon page, to the link in the description down below, and you'll be introduced to a really awesome community of people talking about the hobby, sharing what they're painting. I invite them to be a part of polls to decide what content comes next. I raffle off every battle tome that I review, and we're having some great fun and discussions over there. So go ahead and check it out. Now, if you can't support in that way, that's completely fine. I'm just so glad that you watched this video here today. And if you have an Age of Sigmar lore question, go ahead and click subscribe and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single question and comment. I respond to as many as I possibly can, but I use them all as inspiration for future videos. So go ahead and do that now. And I look forward to seeing you guys on my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.